Recently, Ocasio-Cortez went on a tour of some detention facilities with Customs and Border Protection. This sparked a massive controversy as she accuses them of making a woman drink from a toilet. She's highlighted a report from ProPublica showing that many CBP agents were part of a group that were posting derogatory images of her and insulting her, and she called this being attacked. Now we're hearing that Border Patrol agents said that she was yelling at them and threatening them, and now we have this whole ridiculous controversy about what really happened. So, I'm going to go through some of the stories. I want to see what Ocasio-Cortez has to say about what they're doing and why, and also statements from the CBP refuting and calling her out. And of course, we know where this will go. The left will defend Ocasio-Cortez and the right will defend CBP, and all I can really do is give you my thoughts on the matter. However, there was also an incident where many of the far-left Democrats were speaking, denouncing the facilities, but protesters showed up shouting them down. Of course, you have the left now saying they're Islamophobic, weird, and you have the right saying they're Hispanic, anti-illegal immigration, pro-immigration protesters. So welcome to politics. This is how the game is played. Let's get started with what happened at the border where Border Patrol are claiming AOC was yelling at them in a threatening manner. And before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a monthly PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address, but of course, recently we learned YouTube is no longer suggesting my videos. So I ask you, if you think my content is good, to suggest my videos yourselves by sharing them on whatever platform you think is appropriate. Here's the first story from the Washington Examiner. AOC screamed at Border Patrol agents in threatening manner during tour, witnesses say. They say Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez screamed at federal law enforcement agents in a threatening manner during a visit to a Border Patrol facility in El Paso, Texas, and refused to tour the facility, according to two people who witnessed the incident. Now, that's an important point right there because she's claimed she saw horrifying conditions. But witnesses are now saying she actually refused to tour the facility and yelled at the Border Patrol agents. What really happened? I'll say it again. The left will be like, that's a lie. And the right will be like, aha, she didn't do the tour. Whatever. I don't know what to tell you. Let's read on. A group of 14 House Democrats, including Ocasio-Cortez and their aides, kicked off their visit to the region at about 11 a.m. Monday at the El Paso station on Hondo Pass Drive. The group was standing inside the station near an area where migrants are held when Ocasio-Cortez left them to sit inside a nearby holding area with a family as the other lawmakers and aides were briefed on the station operations. Quote, she comes out screaming at our agents right at the beginning of the tour, crying and screaming and yelling, said one witness who said he was stunned by the outburst in front of approximately 40 people. The agents, they wanted to respond, but they held back because she's a congressional delegate. But when you have someone yelling at you in a threatening manner, the same person said, they were like, hey, you need to kind of step back. A second official said she went in and out of the cell during the group's briefing nearby and returned to the group several times to share information she had learned from detainees, including that one person had drank from the toilet. The congresswoman told the group she would not go with 13 other House Democrats on the tour of the facility and stayed with the family. A second official said that while she was around agents, Ocasio-Cortez commented at another point about an unofficial Border Patrol Facebook page that was exposed earlier Monday for offensive content about those in custody and lawmakers, including the congresswoman. Something under her breath. Oh, all of these guys in here are gonna F me. What? Wow, I added that what? That's surprising. The agents are standing there behind their computers. One of the agents laughed at something he was saying to another agent, and she got irate and flipped out, the second Border Patrol official said. Now they're under investigation for it. She took it as they were laughing at her and screams at them and says, what's so funny? CBP did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the internal affairs matter. The Border Patrol official said managers were in the process of taking statements from agents. The story goes on to say that the Washington Examiner submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to CBP for video of the events. Woo! Now it's getting spicy. The congresswoman who led a charge in 2018 to abolish ICE recounted the scene differently in a social media post afterward and did not mention yelling at agents. After I forced myself into a cell with women and began speaking to them, one of them described their treatment at the hands of officers as psychological warfare, waking them at odd hours for no reason, calling them, I'm not going to say what they're calling them, promiscuous women, we'll say that. Tell me what about that is due to a lack of funding, she wrote on Twitter. Well, that's exactly the problem, Ocasio-Cortez. I don't believe you're a neutral actor here who could actually tell me what's going on. And this is a very convenient issue because I want to point one thing out right here. In this segment, Ryan Savadra points out, he says, as Ocasio-Cortez is raging about the conditions of CBP facilities, remember that on Friday's CNN, Jake Tapper confronted her about her voting against Democrat and Republican bills to send aid to the facilities. AO said she did it to send a message. That's interesting. When the Democrats were obstructing and refusing to provide funding that the Republicans had requested, that Trump had requested, they brought up a bunch of excuses. They called it a manufactured crisis. Well, as we now know, it's not manufactured. It's a real crisis, and we can't accommodate all these people, and things are getting bad. Ocasio-Cortez was one of the last holdouts refusing to sign onto a bill to provide funding directly in aid. Around $3 billion of those dollars is directly to better the conditions at these facilities. And she has been reamed for it, even by CNN calling her out for obstructing. How convenient, then, that she comes out of a facility and says they're committing psychological warfare. It has nothing to do with funding, thus justifying her position, refusing to provide the funding these people need. This is a convenient excuse. If the Democrats early on stopped playing the political game and just provided the funding, then perhaps we wouldn't be in this situation. This is a fact. Okay, for the longest time, they said there was no crisis. The Republicans said there was a crisis. The Democrats have finally caved because now even the New York Times, I've stated over and over again, said the New York Times published an editorial board statement saying, give Trump the money he needs. These people are suffering. Now the Democrats look really, really, really bad. Well, very good for Cortez to conveniently find a problem that it's not about funding. Oh, I talked to someone. It's not about funding. Well, I don't buy it. To me, this sounds like Ocasio-Cortez realized she screwed up and she's being called out for it. And she's found a convenient way to make it seem like I was right the whole time. Yeah, well, no one else saw it, and I'm not going to believe you. Let me do a sidestep real quick, okay? I was skateboarding the other day, and it was really interesting because a bunch of the skateboarders, and I'll tell you this, skateboarders are apolitical. They don't care about this stuff. But all of a sudden, we're all talking. One thing that's interesting, side note, is that there are a couple of 15-year-old kids who were talking about how they liked Jordan Peterson, and that was surprising to me. But one thing that was interesting is that while we were all kind of arguing over what was going on in politics, there was a point where AOC was brought up and everyone kind of agreed. She's lost the plot. She's out of her mind. You know, it's fine if she wants to come in and say, like, here are my policies that make sense and they're left-leaning. I can agree with that. But the way she's trying to implement them is just completely nuts. The things she says, in my opinion, completely nuts. And now she does this. But let's read on because we've got some statements from CBP moving forward, I want to highlight where they refuted her claims about the woman drinking from a toilet. Quote, now I've seen the inside of these facilities. It's not just the kids, it's everyone. People drinking out of toilets, officers laughing in front of members of Congress. Wait. So that really happened? Did she actually say that? That's an actual statement. She really was upset that people were laughing? Like, dude, what are you, like a substitute teacher who's yelling at the kids? I brought it up to their superiors. They said officers are under stress and act out sometimes. No accountability, she tweeted. Just left the first CBP facility. I see why CBP officers were being so physically and sexually threatening towards me. Were they? Officers were keeping women in cells with no water and had told them to drink out of the toilets. This was them on their good behavior in front of members of Congress. Here's what's interesting. So we got a statement here. The agent on scene said the congresswoman misrepresented why a person in custody had drunk from the toilet. So this is what happened with the migrant and drinking water from the toilet. She wanted water and didn't know how to use the faucet in the cell and drank from the toilet. She never told AOC that we made her drink from the toilet. AOC, of course, changed it. This was when she, the migrant, was apprehended and brought into the facility, according to the agent. A Border Patrol official familiar with the sector's media and congressional visit said the city's Congresswoman Veronica Escobar had been through stations 15 times, but did not respond in the same way as her colleague on Monday. Later in the visit, the first official said Escobar yelled at El Paso Chief Patrol Agent Aaron Hull about its care of detainees. We've never hidden anything from her, the official said. So what I find interesting, and what's going around is a photo of a potential toilets. The way these toilets are presented is that it's one unit where on the top is a water fountain, and on the bottom is the toilet. On the top, you can get fresh potable water, and the toilet is, well, it's a toilet. Apparently, she didn't understand how to get water out of the top, out of the faucet, and so she drank from the toilet. Ocasio-Cortez said that she was forced to do it. CBP says she just didn't know what she was doing. Take it for, look, of course I mentioned for the third time, the left is going to be like, nope, the CBP's lying. They're unaccountable. They're doing things that are bad. You know what, man? I usually find the truth is closer to the middle. Plain and simple. I'm willing to bet that the CBP officers are a bit callous. Like, they don't really care. It's a job. I know how people in jails, operate. They're not going to act like buddies with the migrants who are detained there, so it may be a bit callous. Do I think they're psychologically torturing these people? No, of course. That's insane. It's absurd. Maybe it's happening. Maybe it's a few bad apples. But this idea being presented, there's a bunch of mischievous, evil CBP men twirling their mustaches, as I like to claim. They say as they make the migrants drink from the toilets. No, that's ridiculous. Okay, that's ridiculous. It's a conspiracy theory that a bunch of evil men are just trying to hurt migrants. I really, really don't think that's the case. I do believe the facilities are bad. I do believe they need funding, and I'm going to point to AOC and be like, you still obstructed that bill, okay? There's blame to go around, okay? But we do have a crisis, and it was the Democrats who didn't sign on because they kept calling it a manufactured crisis. Why? Well, in my opinion, brownie points, political points. They wanted to resist at all costs. Congratulations, you reap what you sow. Stop acting like it's the fault of CBP when you, as an individual, Ocasio-Cortez, was the one who obstructed the bill and continued to. Because, like you said on CNN, you wanted to send a message. Congratulations, you did. You sent a message to those kids who don't have beds. So here's what's interesting. There's a bit more to go through. After the Democrats came out to issue statements, the Politico points out that so we'll start here. Ocasio-Cortez and other progressives fought efforts last week to pass the Senate's aid bill, saying without further accountability for federal agencies running the detention facilities and caring for children, the humanitarian aid was unlikely to have a significant impact. She reiterated those criticisms after visiting the border on Monday, adding that one woman described her treatment as psychological warfare. As Ocasio-Cortez and other Democrats attempted to share their findings Monday, the group was bombarded by protesters, many donning pro-Trump attire, who repeatedly interrupted them to hurl insults at the members of Congress. Several shouted liar or booed when a Democratic lawmaker stood at the mic. They also yelled retorts like, what about the kids in Planned Parenthood who are getting killed? Or close the effing border down. VC, who was also harassed by the protesters, called the behavior ugly and racist. It was bad. They were using foul language, inappropriate language to dehumanize members of Congress. At one point, freshman rep Ayanna Pressley stood at the podium and shouted back at the protesters, keep yelling. This is very appropriate. Vile rhetoric for vile actions. Hateful rhetoric for hateful behavior. Racist words and venom for racist policies. I'm not here to condemn or condone the protesters. I don't believe that you should use bigoted, hateful speech to get your point across. I don't know that they did. They may have. That's not the point. The point is, congratulations, far-left Democrats. You are now being protested the same way that other Republicans are being protested. But I think you should bless your lucky stars. No one threw a milkshake at you. Matt Gaetz was leaving an event, and a woman who actually ran against him for Congress as a Democrat threw some kind of drink. It was a slushie or a smoothie or something. Hit him with a drink. Okay? So if you're going to be upset that people are saying mean words, I can respect that. And I would say the protesters shouldn't be using certain language to get your point across. By all means, protest. But welcome to the party. This is what protesters do. And now you're being protested because you are rather extreme and you have many people who are angry at you. This is a normal part of politics. And it's called the First Amendment. Notice how they call it harassment. This is hilarious. Who was harassed by the protesters. Are you joking? Harassment. Look, in most legal settings, harassment requires repeated offenses, meaning someone does something, you tell them to stop, and then they do it again. Now it's harassment. Protesters showing up and saying you're liars and I don't like what you're doing is not harassment. It's literally protesting. You want to know what's harassment? How about Matt Gaetz getting hit by a drink? Welcome to the party. You reap what you sow. Okay? When you go out and protest, don't be surprised when people protest you. But of course, I guess they don't like free speech. They're the ones who want these big tech platforms to police speech. Well, surprise, surprise, they call getting protested harassment. But there's more. What was happening in 2016 that I found, one of the things that happened in 2016 that was really interesting is how the left willfully misconstrues the point someone is making. They would say that the press takes Trump literally but not seriously, while his supporters take him seriously but not literally. So what do we see now? Ocasio-Cortez tweets this. And now CBP is pushing easily disprovable lies about members of Congress. Truly nuts. And to think this week the GOP and Dem Problem Solver Caucus fought to eliminate all accountability amendments from funding. They just wrote a multi-billion-dollar blank check for misconduct. No, it's called humanitarian aid, and it's specifically, my understanding is it's earmarked $3 billion for aid. But here's what she's referring to. Adam Klasfeld tweeted something that got little attention yesterday. In its mild and belated condemnation of its members' social media posts, the Border Patrol's union repeated a lie about one of their victims, AOC. No, AOC is not a victim because people are saying mean things about her. The union claimed she called Border Patrol guards a certain World War II faction from Germany. She didn't. Here's the thing. In the statement, they said, when Ocasio-Cortez refers to CBP facilities as concentration camps and our agents as World War II camp, people running the camps, when neither could be further from the truth, she does nothing to improve the political discourse. However, as stated above, the discourse must be handled professionally. Here's the thing. It's not a lie. They're just kind of being hyperbolic. Ocasio-Cortez referred to the camps as concentration camps and said, never again. What do you think that implies about the people running those camps? It is not a literal statement. They're not saying she literally came out and made that statement. They're saying she referred to them in a way that makes them out to be. Plain and simple. But of course, instead of arguing in good faith, they take it to its literal end and then say, she never said that word specifically. No, but she did say never again, which is a direct reference to World War II. Period. Stop playing these silly games. I want to go through a few more of her tweets. I do think it's fair to point out her criticisms because, look, at the end of the day, you have two parties, okay? You've got two sides to this issue. It's not always two sides. There's three, there's four sometimes. But here we have Republican versus Democrat, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, like I mentioned now for the fourth time, this is going to fall on tribal lines whether you choose to believe her or not. She tweeted, I can't understate how disturbing it was that CBP officers were openly disrespectful of the congressional tour. If officers felt comfortable violating agreements in front of their own management and superiors, that tells us the agency has lost all control of their own officers. She says, when you pair 9,500 current and former CBP officers are part of a violently racist and sexually violent secret Facebook group, corroborating accounts of abuse, CBP couldn't control their own officers for a congressional tour, what else do you call that but a rogue agency? Wow. I don't believe Ocasio-Cortez for a second. I really don't. She seems to be being very hyperbolic for political points. As I stated earlier, she obstructed the aid bill, and she is trying as hard as she can to justify her position. This is the point I made a couple days ago, that Ocasio-Cortez turns her insane statements into policy positions. She says they're concentration camps. No, not one more dollar. Then everyone says, Cortez, the kids need beds. She goes, well, they're a rogue agency. That's why I'm not going to fund them. No, Ocasio-Cortez. That's not how the system works. That's not how the government works. There are certainly bad actors. I certainly believe we can always approve accountability, and we can open up these facilities and try and make sure, to an extent, to auditors and things like that, to make sure we do better. You know what we need first? You know what we need to make these things better? Funding. And that's what the bill was that you obstructed because you wanted to send your message. It's a rogue agency. Are you now saying that CBP should be disbanded? What's your solution? She doesn't have one. She's been complaining nonstop, talking about how these facilities are bad, but then refusing to get in line with everyone else when they come up with a plan to solve the problem. Saying it's a blank check for misconduct. That's what she said. Is that a joke? What else can you do? Are you seriously implying we should just shut them down and scuttle everybody out into the desert? They're in El Paso, so I don't want to make it seem like it's, the wild, wild west or anything like that. But listen, they may not be good conditions, so they need to be improved. I've heard stories about these facilities, and they sound horrifying. Not all of them. Some of them. They have terrible names. Okay, so I stand with the other Democrats who are proposing this funding bill, and I'll say it again, much respect to all Democrats who agreed to sign onto this bill because it's about time the problems got solved, and it's a good bipartisan effort. But Ocasio-Cortez seems to be trying to save face. So what she does is she doubles down, triples down, quadruples down. She never stops. She doesn't know where the line is. She doesn't know how to say, maybe I was wrong about this. She is off her rocker as far as I'm concerned. And she's dangerous. The rhetoric is getting dangerous. The refusals to admit when you've made a mistake are dangerous. You were wrong, Ocasio-Cortez. The only message you sent by refusing to fund this bill, excuse me, the only message sent was to the migrants who had to drink from the toilet. It's not the Border Patrol's fault if they don't have the facilities or the funding. It's not their fault they laughed at some silly joke and you were mad that they're laughing. It's like this weird, egotistical, narcissistic position. But I'll tell you what, look at those photos. Remember that story about the weird PR stunt she did where she cried over an empty parking lot? For those that aren't familiar with the story, there's photos of her looking forlorn into the camera and like pretending, I think she was pretending to cry. And then it was photos of her. She got reamed by left and right because they were like, why are you showing us pictures of you crying instead of the facilities? But then a photo emerged from a different angle where you could see what she was actually looking at, and it was just an empty stretch of road. There was nothing there. What was she crying about? It really came off like a narcissistic PR stunt where she's looking at the camera all sad, and she's got her, she's another photo with her hands in her face. It's become a meme now. There's one where Joe Biden's creeping up on her. That one's funny. I believe that Ocasio-Cortez is rather sociopathic. She's one of these people who's never tasted true power, and now she's desperate to have it. She won't back down. She won't admit when she's wrong. And I've seen this behavior time and time again. And I'll tell you where it goes. She's going to drive herself off a cliff. If you can't check yourself, you will wreck yourself. Ocasio-Cortez keeps going further and further out there making nonsensical statements like never again. Democrats are eager to get in line. Eventually, you go so far left, you fall off the cliff. Like I mentioned, the other day when I was hanging out with these skateboarders, they all said, man, what is wrong with that woman? What little support she had from regular people is drifting away as she makes these nonsensical statements, and no one believes her anymore. Of course, the tribal resistance Twitterati, they're going to back her up no matter what. Regular people are not going to fall in line with this. I got to say, I've questioned whether or not she'd be reelected because there's some pros and cons. There's the fact that she's famous, so she might just get enough votes to get reelected. But there's also negativity in that fame, and it might inspire a record number of people to come out and vote against her. She may face a redistricting, where they just get rid of her district. She may face a primary challenge, and she may face an actual Republican contender. But I gotta say this. You want to talk about rogue agency? Let's talk about you, Ocasio-Cortez. You are the rogue agent. The Democrats agreed on the bill, and you refused because you are the rogue agent. Plain and simple. I'm not going to make this video another half an hour video. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Let me know what you think. Comment below. If you're listening on the podcast, you can leave a review. More videos to come starting at 6 p.m. youtube.com/timcast. I could talk about this for a million years because I've got other stories, but here's what I'm going to do. I've got another story about the border that I think is extremely alarming. Reports that border agents are arming themselves over a fear of riots. I'm going to save that for the next segment because there's a lot more to talk about. So stick around. I will see you in the next story in a few moments. Thanks for hanging out. youtube.com/timcastnews starting at 6 p.m. The order is inverted for the podcast, but I will see you there.